There is something strange that often happens when someone speaks up about injustice. Very often, the person who names the problem becomes treated as the problem. The person who says, something here isn't right, can quickly be labeled difficult, disruptive, emotional. Meanwhile, the people who remain silent are often seen as calm, reasonable, cooperative. But Jewish tradition asks us to look deeper than appearances, because silence is not always peace, and calm appearances are not always justice. In my last video, we talked about sinat chinam and lashon hara, baseless hatred and destructive speech, and how our words can bring darkness into the world. But words can also bring light. Judaism teaches that speech is not only communication. Speech is moral action. Words can defend dignity. Words can protect the vulnerable. Words can expose injustice. And that is where things become uncomfortable, because human beings often prefer stability over truth. When someone disrupts a system, even an unhealthy one, the group often reacts defensively. Modern psychology gives us language for these dynamics. One concept is the bystander effect. When many people witness something wrong, each person assumes someone else will speak up, so no one does. Another concept is group conformity. People go along with the tone of the room because belonging can feel safer than challenging the group. And then there is cognitive dissonance. When someone names a truth that threatens a comfortable situation, that truth creates psychological discomfort. Instead of confronting the problem, people sometimes confront the person who named it. That is where scapegoating begins. The problem is not solved. The problem is relocated onto the person who exposed it. So the truth teller becomes too much, too emotional, too intense, too disruptive. But sometimes the person people call difficult is simply the one who refused to stay silent when something was wrong. And many of us have experienced moments like that in our own lives. Moments where speaking up suddenly made us look like the problem. We see this dynamic in many situations. Imagine someone who has been mistreated for a very long time. For years, they stay quiet. They endure it. They try to keep the peace. They try not to cause trouble. And then one day they reach a breaking point. They finally say, "This is not okay." And suddenly people point to that moment and say, "See, she's the problem." But they didn't see the years of silence that came before it. They didn't see the harm that led to that moment. They only saw the reaction. And this reveals one of the great failures of human perception. We often confuse the exposure of a wound with the cause of the wound. And if we are honest, most of us have seen some version of this dynamic before. A moment where something clearly wasn't right, but saying something felt uncomfortable. And in those moments, the real question becomes, do we protect the peace or do we pursue justice? Jewish tradition gives us a very clear answer. Justice, justice shall you pursue. Not comfort, comfort shall you pursue. Not appearances, appearances shall you pursue. Justice, justice requires deeper questions. Who is being harmed? Who holds power? Who benefits from silence? Who is paying the price for everyone else's comfort? The Torah also tells us something very direct. You shall not stand idly by the blood of your neighbor. Naturally, it is not always righteousness. Sometimes silence allows harm to continue. Sometimes silence protects the wrong people. Sometimes silence leaves the vulnerable completely alone. Jewish ethics goes one even further. The Torah commands something called tochacha, the responsibility to speak up when wrongdoing is happening. In the book of Leviticus, we are told, you shall surely rebuke your neighbor and not bear sin because of him. The message is powerful. If we see something harmful and we remain silent, we risk becoming complicit. Not because we caused it, but because we allowed it to continue. The rabbis of the Talmud took this idea very seriously. They taught that if a person has the ability to protest wrongdoing but remains silent, that person shares responsibility for what follows. Morality is not only about what we personally do, it is also about what we allow. At the same time, Jewish tradition is realistic about human nature. Judaism believes in repentance. People can change. But the Hebrew Bible also recognizes that some people persist in destructive behavior. In the prayers of Tehillim written by King David, we see repeated recognition that wickedness exists in the world. David does not pretend injustice is imaginary. He names it, he confronts it, and he cries out for justice. So Jewish tradition holds two truths at the same time. We hope for repentance, but we do not ignore evil in the name of peace. Sometimes bringing light into the world means kindness. Sometimes it means patience. Sometimes it means forgiveness. But sometimes it means drawing boundaries. And sometimes it means some kind of righteous anger and standing up for what's right. And sometimes it means naming wrongdoing clearly. And sometimes it means refusing to enable behavior that harms others. And that takes courage. Jewish tradition even teaches that sometimes the greatest obstacle to justice is not hatred, but doubt. The Torah commands us to remember Amalek. Many teachers connect Amalek with the Hebrew word safek, meaning doubt. Doubt that something is really wrong. Doubt that speaking up will matter. Doubt that we have the right to say anything at all. Safek whispers, maybe it's not that bad. Maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe I should stay out of it. And when people listen to that voice, injustice becomes easier to normalize. We see this in the story of Samuel confronting King Shaul. Shaul hesitated. He compromised. But Samuel understood something Shaul did not. Half measures in the face of destructive behavior do not solve the problem. They allow it to continue. The prophets understood this deeply. Yeshayahu did not exist to make society comfortable. Yirmiyahu did not exist to reassure corrupt systems that everything was fine. They challenged kings. They challenged societies that preferred stability over truth. And very often they were rejected for doing so, because truth disturbs comfortable systems. Yet those are the voices our tradition chose to preserve, because without them injustice would remain hidden. Humility in Judaism does not mean shrinking yourself. It means recognizing that your voice and influence are gifts and using them responsibly. One of the most humble figures in the Torah is Moshe Rabbeinu, and yet Moshe confronted Pharaoh. He challenged oppression. He spoke truth to power. So humility and courage are not opposites. They often exist together. Sometimes the courage required is very simple. It is the courage to stand in a room where others are silent and speak anyway. Not because you're perfect, not because you're better than anyone else, but because dignity matters, because justice matters, and because the world becomes brighter every time someone chooses truth over comfort. Bringing light into the world does not always look the way people expect. Sometimes light is gentle, sometimes it is quiet, but sometimes light reveals what was hidden in the dark. And when that happens, the person holding the light may not be welcomed. They may be misunderstood. They may even be blamed. But sometimes the person people call difficult is simply the one who refused to stay silent when something was wrong. Because sometimes bringing light into the world simply means having the courage to say, "This is not right," even when everyone else would prefer your silence.